It's so good to be able to preach live this morning. I truly missed our time together last week. As I said in the video, I hate doing videos. I'm so glad I get to be up here and to be with all of you. It's not just about preaching up here, it's about being with the church family. But this will be our 23rd message in the Gospel of John as we go through it in our sermon series. And last week I covered the raising of Lazarus from the dead in John chapter 11. And so I'm going to skip ahead before we go into our scriptures today. I want to skip ahead to John chapter 12 to see what happened after Lazarus, and then we're going to go back again. Okay, so John chapter 12, verse 9 through 11, and you can follow on the screen. I think it's going to be there. Yep. And then, or you can use your phone or your own Bible, whatever. But John chapter 12, verse 9 through 11 says this: When all the people heard of Jesus' arrival, they flocked to see him and also to see Lazarus, the man Jesus had raised from the dead. Then the leading priests decided to kill Lazarus too, for it was because of him that many of the people had deserted them and believed in Jesus. And so a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today are all the outcomes of what happened with Lazarus. It's all based on the event of Lazarus being raised from the dead. And so we see from John chapter 12, verse 9 through 11, that there is this, the religious leaders are so mad and so frustrated that they're going to go find Lazarus, who was just raised from the dead, and they're going to murder him. Again, these are Orthodox Jewish men who follow the Torah, and they're like, okay, we've had enough. We're going to go ahead and murder. Pretty sure that's one of the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not murder. But they're willing to make the exception for Lazarus, okay? So they're going to murder Lazarus. And they're so frustrated because more and more people are following Jesus because there's now even more evidence that Jesus is the Messiah. Why? There's a guy who was dead for 4 days walking around. 4 days he had been dead, buried in a tomb, and he's walking around. And so they're like, forget the Torah, we're killing them. Forget it. Forget the law. It's for the greater good. We're killing Lazarus. So let's move on. We're going to go back a little bit now to John chapter 11, verse 45 through 53. It says this: Many of the people who were with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw this happen. But some went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the leading priests and the Pharisees called the high council together. What are we going to do? They asked each other. This man certainly performs many miraculous signs. If we allow him to go on like this, soon everyone will believe in him. Then the Roman army will come and destroy both our temple and our nation. Caiaphas, who was the high priest at the time, said, "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't realize that it's better for you that one man should die for the people than for the whole nation to be destroyed." He did not say this on his own. As high priest at that time, he was led to prophecy that Jesus would die for the entire nation. Verse 52. And not only for the nation, but to bring together and unite all the children of God scattered around the world. So from that time on, the Jewish leaders began to plot Jesus' death. Am I on still? Okay. The wonderful happenings at Bethany forced the hand of the Jewish authorities. It was impossible to allow Jesus to continue going about unchecked. Otherwise, the people would continue to follow Jesus in massive droves. So the Sanhedrin was called to deal with this situation. And the Sanhedrin was made up of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, so we call them the religious leaders. The religious leaders, the Pharisees, were not a political party. Their sole interest was living according to the law every day, unless it meant that they needed to murder somebody. On the other hand, the Sadducees were intensely political. They were wealthy and aristocratic party. As long as they were allowed to retain their wealth, comfort, and position authority, they were content to collaborate with Rome. They just wanted to keep what they had. All the priests in Jerusalem were Sadducees. And it's clear that it was the priests who dominated the Sanhedrin and who did the talking based on what we read and what we read in this encounter. These religious leaders feared Jesus raising a disturbance with Rome. See, Rome essentially was very tolerant in what they allowed to happen as long as it didn't cause any sort of civil disorder. And so, but when things did, they would quell it with their firm and merciless hand. If Jesus caused civil disorder, the Sadducees feared that Rome would descend in all their power and might, and the Sadducees would then be dismissed from their positions of authority and replaced with Roman people. It never even occurred to these religious people in the Sanhedrin court to ask a very simple question. Was Jesus right or was he wrong? Their only question was, what effect will this have on my life and my authority? So the Sadducees insisted that Jesus must be eliminated for the Romans to keep themselves in power so the Romans would not take away their power and their authority. In 70 A.D., fast forwarding, years after Jesus, okay? In 70 A.D., that is exactly what happened. The Romans were weary of the Jewish stubbornness, and they besieged Jerusalem and the temple, destroying it all, leaving it in a heap of ruins. Even the steps that they took, the Sanhedrin took, to save their nation from Rome destroying it by killing Jesus, ended up being meaningless because Rome went in anyway and destroyed it in 70 A.D. John's gospel was written probably around 100 A.D., and since the readers had experienced the temple being destroyed in 70 A.D., 30 years prior, all of the people that read the Gospel of John probably read this conversation that the Sanhedrin had and probably saw the irony in it, that we murdered Jesus to save the temple and to save our precious system, and then Rome comes in and destroys it anyway. Caiaphas then, as we read, the high priest, makes his declaration. If you had any sense, you would come to the conclusion that I have, that it's far better that one man should die for the nation than the whole nation should perish. It was the Jewish belief that the high priest asked God's counsel for the nation, and God spoke through him as a channel of God's word to the nation. That's what Caiaphas was that day. Here's another example of dramatic irony. Okay? Caiaphas believed that it was better that Jesus should die than there should be trouble with the Romans. It was true that Jesus must die to save the nation. Yes, that was true, but not in the way that Caiaphas meant it to be. It was true in a far greater and a more wonderful way. It's amazing that God can speak through the most unlikely people, and even with them being unaware of it, that God uses them. God can even use bad people to accomplish his will. Jesus was to die for the nation and for all people all over the world. Jesus did not just die for Israel. Jesus died for every soul that would ever live on this earth. Let's move on to verse 54. As a result, Jesus stopped his public ministry among the people and left Jerusalem. He went to a place near the wilderness, to the village of Ephraim, and stayed there with his disciples. It was now almost time for the Jews' Passover celebration, and many people from all over the country arrived in Jerusalem several days early so they could go through the purification ceremony before the Passover began. They kept looking for Jesus, but as they stood around the temple, they said to each other, "What do you think? He won't come to Passover, will he?" Meanwhile, the leading priests and the Pharisees had publicly ordered that anyone seeing Jesus must report it immediately so they could arrest him. See, Jesus was willing to lay his life down, but he was not so reckless to throw it away before his work was done. So he escapes to Ephraim, escapes into the wilderness, escapes away from the crowd and the confusion because it was not quite yet the time. It was very close, but it was quite not yet the time. Jerusalem was filling up with people for Passover, and people were waiting around. Where's Jesus? Is he going to come? Is he going to come? They knew the dynamics of the religious leaders wanting to kill Jesus, and they're mad and angry, and Jesus kept speaking against them, and it was so entertaining for everybody. This is great. This is the greatest show we've seen in a long time. Keep it up. Come on, Jesus, come back. But as we see as the concluding verses of chapter 11, Jesus had become an outlaw in the city. It may be that the authorities had offered a reward for information leading to the apprehension of Jesus, and that is what Judas sought and probably received in the 30 pieces of silver. So we see the response of religious leaders to this miracle of Lazarus being raised from the dead. They wanted to kill Jesus, and they want to kill Lazarus. Therefore, even seeing all these signs and wonders, seeing him raise a man from the dead, it doesn't matter. Their response is murder. So let's see what a few more people's response is to Lazarus. Let's go to John chapter 12, next chapter over, verses 1 through 8. This is a much better, uplifting story. 6 days before the Passover celebration began, Jesus arrived in Bethany, the home of Lazarus, the man that he had raised from the dead. A dinner was prepared in Jesus' honor. Martha served, and Lazarus was among those who ate with him. Then Mary took a 12-ounce jar of expensive perfume made from incense of nard, and she anointed Jesus' feet with it, wiping his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance. But Judas Iscariot, the disciple who would soon betray him, said that perfume is worth a year's wage. It should have been sold and the money given to the poor. Not that he cared for the poor, he was a thief, and since he was in charge of the disciples' money, he often stole some for himself. Jesus replied, "Leave her alone. She did this in preparation for my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me." 6 days before the Passover and 6 days before Jesus would be the Passover lamb to die for all of sin, to be sacrificed for the world, Jesus chose to spend his last Passover meal, his last time together with his beloved friends in Bethany, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Martha decided to serve a meal that was made in Jesus' honor. It was a God-honoring service for her to do this. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 20, verse 26 to 27, he says, "Whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you shall be your slave." See, the Bible honors the service, and Martha will always be remembered as we read this. I know it kind of seems like she gets a bad rap, but Martha will always be honored as one that serves. We are all called to be servants of God, the servants of each other as well. She does it because she loved her Lord. She served because she loved Jesus. And she loves the people she serves. The next person in this narrative is Mary. John writes, "Then Mary took a 12-ounce jar of expensive perfume and nard made from the essence of nard, and she anointed Jesus' feet with it, wiping it with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance." See, Mary worships her Lord with humble sacrifice. John is very deliberate and detailed in telling us what took place in this event. It does not have anything to do with theology. It doesn't have anything to do with doctrine. But the details are given to us to describe the lavish nature of Mary's affection and worship to Jesus. She pours out 12 ounces of this very costly, pure nard perfume. And that's a lot of perfume. It's a lot. Nard was an exceedingly rare herb that is grown in the high pasture lands in like China and Tibet and India. Because it came from so far and it was such a pure amount, it was very valuable. In fact, we know the amount because Judas, the money keeper, the money changer, tells us that. Judas Iscariot, he valued it in verse 5 as 300 denarii, which is a day's wage. So just 300 days of work, that's how much this perfume was worth. And Mary pours it all out on his feet. Why? Because Jesus was worthy. There's nothing to save. Jesus is worthy of every drop of it. It was then that Mary's heart ran over in love with this perfume. Mary anointed Jesus' feet. Now, if you're not following along, this is before Jesus washes his disciples' feet. So this is not something that she's witnessed Jesus doing. This is something that she does first by anointing his feet and washing his feet. And she doesn't use water to clean it up. She uses expensive, the most expensive possession that she has probably, She pours it on his feet, and then she doesn't have a towel. She doesn't use the servant. She comes and she uses her hair. She uses her hair. Mary's heart was overflowing, and as she expresses her heart's adoration through this sacrifice, and it is a truest form and expression of worship. She loosened her hair, which was a radical thing for the women to do in the presence of men, but she let it down that she might use it to wipe his feet. And it seems gross. I know maybe a lot of you read this, especially if you're young. But in this culture, this move went far beyond just cleanliness. In Palestine, no respectable woman would ever appear in public with her hair unbound. This was a sign of an immoral woman to have your hair down in public. But Mary never even thought of that. Or if she did think of it, she didn't care. She didn't care what anyone thought about it. See, when you're truly in love with someone, expressing that love supersedes what anyone else might think or judge about you. I remember when I was in college and I met Megan and we started dating, and then I started falling in love with her. I think all my friends used to come up to me like, dude, come on, go out and hang out. Why are you always with your girl? Come on, man. Why are you always with her? And I was like, because I love her. And I couldn't think of anything else I'd rather do than be with her. And all these people are like, oh, man, you guys are like so sick. Like, I'm so tired of seeing you guys hold hands and all that different stuff. And I could care less. And I don't, you can ask my wife, I do not like public displays of affection. And I do not. And I didn't care. I didn't care. I was like, tough, cool, I love her. I love her more than you. And so, like, I just couldn't stand that. And so I look at this story of Mary not caring what anyone thought and taking her hair and washing Jesus' feet and all these men judging her, and she could care less. I know many are self-conscious about showing their love for Jesus. Many of us are reserved to show our love for Jesus, concerned about what other people are thinking. Mary's a perfect example of how we are to worship Jesus. Mary loved Jesus so much that she didn't care what others thought of her. So often when I look around our churches, I see so many people concerned about what the person sitting next to them is going to think, or the person in the front of the church is going to think, and they reserve their time of worship. They reserve because they're afraid what people might think, instead of just letting the love that they claim to have for Jesus be everything. And I don't care what anyone else thinks, because my love for him is more. Foot washing was a part of the dinner preparations because people wore sandals and roads. The roads were dirty and filthy and nasty, and so when they came in for these meals, they would sit on the ground and they recline on these low tables. And so your feet are right up there, right close to the next person. You're reclining, your feet's right in his lap or whatever, and you're like, dude, you got like camel dung on your toes, okay? And so, like, can we wash these up? Can we wash these up a little bit? And so this was a part of this in this reclining scene. But she does this not to just serve Jesus, but she desired to worship him. This is a love that knows no bounds. This is unrestricted, unrestrained worship. It's extravagant, it's humble, it's generous. She gave potentially her most valuable possession to worship the Lord. This is true worship, giving God the best that you have. There must have been a stunned silence with all of the disciples, stunned that they're witnessing this. Why is she doing this? Who is she to do this? She's a woman. What does she do? She's interrupting our meal. What's going on? And just thinking and dwelling in this silence, stunned at seeing Mary do this to Jesus. Then their silence was interrupted by Judas, whom John describes for us as the disciple who intended to betray him and later would. Judas ungraciously questioned her action and sheer waste of wasting this perfume. Judas thought that he would become powerful and wealthy, throwing his lot into Jesus, with Jesus in his group, thinking that he would be given this position of authority in Jesus' new coming kingdom. But it became clear to him that things were not going according to Judas' plan. that, I think Jesus might die. I'm not going to get a kingdom if Jesus dies. I'm not going to be wealthy. I'm not going to be powerful. I'm not going to be important. While everyone else was growing in love with Christ, he was moving in the opposite direction. Everything was going wrong for him, but he had to keep up the charade. So he says in verse 5, that perfume was worth a year's wage. It should be sold and money should have been given to the poor. And it sounds noble, right? As you read this, you're like, oh, yeah, I mean, that's a noble thing. That kind of seems accurate. But in verse 6, John helps us out to see the true intentions. He says, not that he cared for the poor, he was a thief. And since he was in charge of disciples' money, he often stole money for himself. In other words, when things did not go in the directions that he thought they should go, he began to embezzle and take the little bit of money that they had for himself, skimming from the top. He was ready to get out and take some money for his time served. I deserve this. I served 3 years with Jesus. I deserve some money. Judas had seen the hostility of religious leaders. He saw the writing on the wall, and he knew that they were going to take Jesus' life. We see in Judas how a person's view can be easily warped. Judas had just seen one of the most purest acts of worship ever recorded in the Bible. He saw one of the most, purest of worships, yet he called it extravagant waste. He was an embittered man, and he took an embittered view of things. Our view of things depends on what is on the inside in our heart. We see only what we allow ourselves to see. If we like a person, that person can do very little wrong in our eyes. But if we dislike them, we will search for faults in all that they say and all that they do, looking for all the wrongs that they have in their life. See, a warped mind brings a warped view of situations. If we find ourselves becoming very critical of others and imputing unworthy motives to things that they say and they do, I think it's probably accurate for us that we should stop examining other people and start examining ourselves. As he rebukes Mary for her worship, Jesus silenced Judas by saying the money could be given to the poor at any time, but the kindness done to him must be done now, for soon the chance will be gone forever. See, the poor will always be around, and they can be helped at any time. But to show this kind of love and worship to Jesus and this devotion to Jesus while he was on earth needed to happen within the next 6 days. Jesus says in verse 7, he tells Judas, leave her alone. She did this in preparation for my burial, and I absolutely love that. Here's why. Jesus defended Mary's honor in her worship. Some of you who struggle with worshiping because you're afraid of what people might think, I want you to hear something. Jesus will defend you. The King of Kings will defend your worship if it's pure, if it's righteous, if it's true. You don't have to ever defend yourself if you worship Jesus. No matter what it looks like, no matter what it sounds, whatever. He defends true worship. So stop caring about what anyone else thinks or says. Just worship with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind. Jesus connects Mary's expression of love and worship to his burial. And I asked my question, did Mary actually know about the burial in her mind? Was she further advanced than the disciples? We don't know. We have no idea if she knew this. But Jesus interpreted what she did as an anointing for his burial. And regardless of how it happened or what happened, Jesus saw it for what it really was. It was God's plan for her to be anointed like that. Even if she didn't do it on purpose, it was God's plan for her to be anointed so that it could be the pre-burial anointing of Jesus. To me, John is showing us 3 different reactions to King Jesus. And when I say King Jesus, I mean that King Jesus because Jesus proved himself as the Messiah by resurrecting Lazarus, okay? So there's 3 different reactions to King Jesus. First group was the religious leaders and Judas, who their decision, their interpretation, their decision is to reject Jesus based on all the evidence. They got all the evidence, and they decide we're going to reject Jesus. What's interesting is that Judas, as we look at Judas, Judas was once a believer. Judas had once believed in Jesus and his power and witnessed all the miracles, had once believed, yet rejected Jesus because he no longer fit what he wanted him to be. Jesus no longer was the man that he thought he was going to be, and he's no longer going to do the things he's going to do. And so he once accepted him, and now he rejects him. See, I think there's a lot of people that do the same thing all over the world, all over the country, all over America. There's a lot of people that accept Jesus and his gift to forgive sins. They willingly accept that, but then they reject Jesus being the Lord of their life. It's a big difference between accepting his gift of salvation, and there's a big difference then from making him the Lord of your life, which is master. Making him master of our life. Then you have Mary and Martha, who's the other group, who accepted and embraced Jesus as Lord. We see that evidence in their worship. They worship Jesus freely. They worship the Lord, the King of Kings. And then there's a third group. It's the group that are the seekers, the searching crowd. They're a group of people that are on the fence. They like what Jesus has to say, but they're not willing to become his disciple. They like everything, but they're not wanting to follow him. They want to experience, they want what he has, but aren't willing to get off the fence and to join him. They worship and they follow when it's convenient. But in the end, this crowd who was cheering Jesus on and rooting for him, they were cheering for his murder 6 days later. In the end, it comes down to a choice with two options. Here it is. Do you belong to Jesus or do you reject him? Those are the only two options of one choice. Do you accept him? Do you believe? Or do you reject him? In Jesus, believers are divided. We see from Scripture, believers are divided from unbelievers, like sheep and goats, children of God, and children of the devil. You're either for him or you're against him. And church, let me just let you know this, if you don't know this. The fence belongs to the devil. The fence is exactly where he wants you because you have to make a choice. You're either his or you're not. It's as simple as that. You can't tote the line. You can't play both sides. The fence belongs to the devil. And you have to make a choice. If the evidence is enough for you to believe, these people, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the religious leaders, the crowd, Mary, Martha, Judas, all these people I've mentioned today, all witnessed Jesus resurrecting a man from the grave. They saw the evidence. They saw Lazarus walking around. They see the evidence of Jesus being the Messiah. And they're left with a decision. They have to make a choice. Is the evidence enough to believe that he is the Son of God, the King of Kings? And the evidence is here for you all today. Is there enough evidence for you to believe, making Jesus the Lord of your life, or is there not? You know Jesus is the Lord of Mary and Martha. And here's how we know, because the evidence and the fruit comes out in their worship. Without a shadow of a doubt, I know Mary and Martha believe and follow Jesus, that Jesus is their Lord. Why? You can see the evidence in their worship. You know it's true. Who else would pour out the most expensive possession all over the feet of somebody and wasting it in worship if they didn't truly love that person? Who else would serve everybody, all the disciples, all these different people, if you didn't love that person in Martha, as Martha did? See, Mary and Martha freely sacrificed their very best. Martha loved Jesus and worshiped him by using her talents that God gave for her to serve. And so she used them to serve not just everyone, but to serve Jesus. That's the key right there. It was worship because she served Jesus with the talents. Worship is when we sacrifice and give up our very best to the Lord. Mary and Martha are both great examples of the fruit of a surrendered heart to Jesus, and we see what happens. What is the evidence? What is the fruit of a surrendered heart to Jesus? It's worship. Make sure you heard that. The evidence of a surrendered heart to Jesus is worship. It's worship. A lot of people look at this story and they put themselves in one of these categories. They say, oh, I'm like Mary. I'm like Mary. I like to worship, and I don't like to serve. Then you have people that are, oh, I'm not like Mary. I serve. I just serve her. That's how I show my love to Jesus. I just serve, but I never will do any extravagant worship. And you have people that put themselves on both sides and put themselves and say, I'm one or the other. And that's what they are. And I just want to let you guys know this. This is very important. You can't be one or the other. You cannot be one or the other. You can't say, I'm a behind-the-scenes person. I don't ever show any sort of emotion because I just serve, and that's how I serve. That's how I love Jesus. You cannot do that. Because if you're ashamed of me, what does Jesus say? If you're ashamed of me, I will also be ashamed of you. Okay? It is, you cannot be one or the other. You have to freely show your love and adoration. Okay? And you can't just, be the one that shows your love and adoration and worship, but then doesn't help and serve others as well. And I know this to be true because in my own life, because there are times and seasons whenever I'm like doing things and serving others and serving and serving and serving and serving, and I feel like something is wrong in my life, and I'm like, Lord, I'm serving you. I'm worshiping you by serving you. And he's like, no, you have not spent any time with me. You've not worshiped me in other ways too. I need to be with you alone too. So you cannot just do one or the other. So I want to ask this question to you. I want us all to kind of put ourselves in this situation as I'm closing up here. If Jesus showed up in this room today, okay, if Jesus walked in here, now I want to make sure you understand that. Jesus is past the cross. He is risen. He has ascended into heaven. Next time he comes back, he is going to have a crown. He's going to be riding on a white horse, and it is going to be power and might and authority, okay? Not meek, not mild, okay? It's going to be power, okay? If Jesus shows up into this room and Jesus walks into this room, what kind of gift are you going to bring him? Think about that. If Jesus is in this room, he comes in this room, and we all are, I guarantee there's not a single person in this room that's not going to try to worship. Not a single person's not. My question is, what kind of gift are you going to bring to him? What kind of gift of worship are you going to bring to him? I would think it'd probably be endless for most of us. Whatever. We bring him whatever I can, whatever would honor him while he's in this room. Man, whatever it is, there's nothing I would hold back. So here's a better question. The better question is this. Even if Jesus is not here physically in this room right now, why in the world would you not bring him that same gift? Why does he have to be here physically for you to give him your very best? Make it make sense. I should be cutting pretty deep. Cutting pretty deep. For every single one of us in this room. Why does he have to be here? Why does he have to be here for you to give his very best? To give your very best to him? Why can't you give your very best to him right now? Especially for all of us who say that he lives in our heart. For all of us that claim he lives in us. Why in the world would he not get your very best if he dwells in you? Is he not worthy in your life? Is he not worthy for each of us? Friends, he is worthy. Think of the things he's done in your life. Think of the goodness he has shown you. Think of the salvation that he has given you. Is he not worthy? Is he not worthy for what he's done? Is he not worthy for who he is? Not even going on what he's done for you, but how about for who he is? He is the King of Kings. He's the Lord of Lords. He's the maker of everything. Is he not worthy in your life? to be worshiped as Mary worshiped him. I ask you this, why won't you not bow down and worship him? Stop worrying about what people think about you and worship him for who he is and what he deserves. So I'm going to ask this final question. Band, go ahead and come up here. Who are you in this story? Who are you in this story? Are you one of the religious leaders? I hope not. You can change today. If you're one of the religious leaders, please change today. Are you Judas? Did you know him in the past but accepted his forgiveness, but yet you aren't willing to make him the Lord of your life? Because that was Judas's problem. He was unwilling to let Jesus be the Lord because he wanted certain things, and Jesus wasn't going to give him certain things, and so Jesus was not a good Lord for him because Judas wanted a different type of Lord. Are you Judas? Are you a fence-dwelling crowd? You ride on the crowd, man, I love Jesus, but man, I like both sides. I just cannot fully give myself to Jesus. Are you a fence dweller? Are you riding on the enemy's fence? Or are you Mary and Martha and you're a true worshiper and you're giving him your very best in worship? Would you all please stand?